the final day of their respective presidential campaigns, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris both predicted victory on Monday, with opinion polls showing them locked in a dead heat. The candidates concentrated their efforts in Pennsylvania, the biggest prize on Election Day among the 7 states expected to decide the outcome. Trump appeared before a large crowd in Pittsburgh, where he delivered what his campaign called his closing message to voters.
I will restore peace in the world, and I will rescue the American dream.
Trump pushed economic themes, vowing to deliver an economic boom, while warning Harris would bring economic misery.
My message to Americans tonight is simple. We do not have to live this way. We don't.
Trump's frantic Monday schedule also included stops in the battleground states of North Carolina and Michigan before returning to his Florida home Monday night. Meanwhile, Harris packed in 5 campaign stops in Pennsylvania throughout the day. In Allentown, she appealed to the city's sizable Puerto Rican community after a comedian at a Trump rally last week made racist comments about Puerto Ricans and other minority groups.
We are not going back. We are not going back.
Later, Harris went door-knocking in Reading and held her own brief rally in Pittsburgh. Harris ended the day with an event in Philadelphia, where she was joined by A-list celebrities including Lady Gaga and Oprah Winfrey. Harris forecast a close race and for the last time implored Pennsylvanians to get out the vote.
The race ain't over yet, and we must finish strong, and this could be one of the closest races in history. Every single vote matters.
The Harris campaign says its internal data shows that undecided voters are breaking in their favor. It reports an increase in early voting among core parts of its coalition, including young voters and voters of color. Trump campaign officials meanwhile said they were monitoring early voting results that show more women have voted than men. That is significant considering Harris's 12-point edge over Trump among female registered voters, according to an October Reuters Ipsos poll. The winner may not be known for days after Tuesday's vote. Trump and his allies, who falsely claim his 2020 election loss was the result of fraud, have already signaled they will attempt to fight any defeat. They have spent months laying the groundwork to again challenge the result if he loses. Harris campaign officials said any attempts by Trump to allege fraud will fail, while Democrats say they have plans in place should Trump try to prematurely claim victory. As the U.S. presidential candidates draw their campaigns to a close, Democrat Kamala Harris and her Republican opponent Donald Trump struck contrasting tones on Sunday. While Harris made her closing pitch to undecided voters in Michigan, Trump leaned into violent rhetoric and seemed more focused on revving up his base. In Pennsylvania, where Trump survived an assassination attempt in July, the former president on Sunday frequently abandoned his teleprompter with off-the-cuff remarks. At one point, he complained about gaps in the bulletproof glass surrounding him and mused that an assassin would have to shoot through the news media to hit him.
And to get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news. And I don't mind that so much, because I don't mind that.
Though Trump frequently bashes the media at his rallies and has tried to turn public opinion against them, a campaign spokesperson said the comment was not directed toward the media, but rather, quote, threats against them that were spurred on by dangerous rhetoric from Democrats. After a stop in North Carolina, Trump went on to a rally in Macon, Georgia, another of the 7 battleground states likely to decide the November 5th election. Trump called the United States a, quote, nation in decline, and warned without evidence of a second Great Depression with, quote, people jumping off buildings. Meanwhile, Harris on Sunday was in the swing state of Michigan. She first spoke to parishioners at a historically black church in Detroit before heading on to a rally in East Lansing, where she courted the state's 200,000 Arab Americans. Harris started her speech with a nod to civilian victims of Israel's wars in Gaza and Lebanon.
This year has been difficult, given the scale of death and destruction in Gaza, and given the civilian casualties and displacement in Lebanon. It is devastating. And as president, I will do everything in my power to end the war in Gaza.
Reuters Ipsos polling shows that voters overall view both candidates unfavorably. But that does not appear to be dissuading them from casting ballots. Data from the University of Florida's election lab showed that more than 78 million Americans have already voted early. That's nearly half of the total votes that were cast in 2020, in which U.S. voter turnout was the highest.
You shouldn't be able to choose what goes on between a doctor and their patients.
And I feel like the most important issue is fixing our economy. I didn't grow up with much, like single parent household, so I know what it's like to struggle, and I wouldn't want that for anybody.
Definitely groceries, definitely food, definitely rent, definitely utilities, for sure. The electric bill has been substantially higher.
I think that the other countries kind of look at us a little weaker than they did at previous terms.
I would say definitely it's like women's reproductive rights and just women's rights in general. I want the option to be able to have an abortion. I'm 24 years old. If I were to get pregnant right now, it would ruin my life.
I have 3 daughters, and they will have children, I think, someday, and I fear for what may happen to them.
I feel like women should be able to choose who they want to be and what they want to do.
Salwa Abdallah was recuperating from a cesarean section when soldiers burst into her home. They were from the Rapid Support Forces, one side in Sudan's 19-month-old war. They accused her of supporting their rivals, the Sudanese army and its allies, and threatened to kill her, her child and her mother, and rape her daughters.
I gave them the money I had. They asked me to give them my jewelry. I told them I will give them my jewelry. They told me, give us the jewelry while we go to another home and come back to you. Once they left to the neighbor's home, I took my daughters quickly, despite my C-section, and moved my mother, and we hid in the animals' enclosure.
The incident took place in Sudan's El Gezira last month. The eastern state has suffered a series of intense violent raids over the past 2 weeks, affecting, according to activists, at least 65 villages and towns. Having walked for days, Abdallah and her family are now at a camp in neighbouring Kassala state. They are among the 135,000 people the United Nations says have been displaced by this latest burst of violence. El Gezira had already been subject to a violent looting campaign by the RSF since it took control last December, but the defection last month of its chief in the state unleashed a series of revenge attacks. The Wad Medani Resistance Committee, a pro-democracy group, named 169 people killed since the violence began on October 20, though in a statement it said there were hundreds more. The worst incident was in El Sureha, where the committee said 124 people were killed on October 25. Video verified by Reuters showed RSF soldiers lining up men. Many of them were elderly and some in blood-splattered clothes. Another video verified by Reuters showed dozens of bodies wrapped up in sheets for burial. The RSF has denied ordering the attacks and said they were the result of the army arming local communities. The war has unleashed a hunger crisis across Sudan, with both sides accused of hindering international aid. Back in Kassala State, Hashim Bashir sits in the bus that brought him here from his home in El Gezira. His leg was amputated before the war began, but his disability didn't stop soldiers from throwing him out of his home.
They are very vicious. They do not have mercy for the old, women, men or children. They beat. If you survive their gunshots, they hit you on your head. If you survive this, they will beat you with a whip just like children, and they make you cry like children.
His niece, Fayeja Mohammed, says soldiers beat her uncle and threw his wheelchair on top of him. She was also beaten, she says, including her earring being ripped from her ear. They displaced us, burned down our homes and starved us, she says. May God inflict harm on them.